Hey guys, Justin here, and I thought I would like to bring up the Fnatic versus EG game to highlight the concept of jungle dynamics and how that influences the rest of the game. This is the first day of playing from day one, and this is my highlight game that I would like to use to bring a little teaching moment over here. Now, if we were to examine the draws from both teams, Fnatic has a scaling team fighting team, and EG has a Drake stacking auto Olympic team that kind of gets outskilled of sorts by what Fnatic has to bring on the table. So the onus is on EG to attack the game, and there's a few ways they can choose to do that. Now, a lot of times people simply talk about potting to top or playing to bot or playing to top as the way of deciding how the jungler should be playing the game. I would like to introduce a broader concept of match jungle potting versus mismatched jungle potting. But before we delve into that, let's take a look at what the lanes can afford both of these teams. Now, Aatrox is going to need a little bit of help as he is at risk of getting dove by 3 men by the Renekton if he's able to bring the mid and jungle to help them, whereas Renekton will have priority and has wave control, opening up a fair bunch of options for him, such as being able to then walk into the opponent's jungle to either disturb them or drop down a ward or even contest for a possible invade in that scenario. On the mid lane, Victor is the opposite, where it is now Fnatic who has wave control on the mid lane, and it is Silas who needs help, whereas he will need help to get the crash in on wave 5 or 6, or for a reset at a point of time. Whereas for the bot lane, it is EG's main source of pressure, where Caitlyn and Lux is enchanted bot lane against a melee bot lane, and they will take the 2v2 lead if enforced accordingly. Whereas Miss Fortune and Lux, they would need the jungle help at one point of time to get a reset in for themselves, and if they were to get to 9 minutes or level 6 without falling too far behind, the matchup should flip in their favor once they get access to their ultimates. So let's see what the junglers can afford them. Now it is important to understand who clears faster or slower, and in this case, Graves is a slower clearing jungler with weaker ganks, whereas Viego is a faster clearing jungler who does very well if the Graves were to show up first in the lane. So if you are Razork in this scenario, talking about match and mismatch jungle potting, how would you decide the path in this game? We want to clear to top, clear to bot, try for a cheesier play where you do rip off into bot gank, hopping over the dragon pit wall to find a play, or perhaps going for a reverse clear. Now to reframe things into this idea of match and mismatch jungle potting, this is what you will end up with if you were to choose any of these options. If you were to clear to top, you end up in a mismatch scenario. If you were to clear to bot, you end up in a match scenario, as this is where the vehicle would likely be potting. If you were to choose a red buff into bot gank, this is a pseudo mismatch scenario. And if you were to go for a reverse clear, it gives you the safest options for you as Graves to be safe, but it is also rather inefficient. And given that you're solo clearing jungler, that might not be the most ideal. So pause the video here and take some time to think about it. What would you choose here if you were the Graves? Now, if all four options here I actually think are possible and would not result in an extremely losing scenario, but I have, like I mentioned earlier, doing the reverse clear option where you do something along the lines of red, blue, Grom, it is definitely the safest, but I do not think you need to do that, as Victor should be able to cover you from any invades, and um, that is probably the weakest option over here. Clearing to bot results in a mass chunk potting scenario, and we will take a look at the results of that, as that is what Razor chose in this game. But most of the time, in these type of scenarios, especially against enchanter supports, you generally want to be looking for mismatch situations to help them out, to then neutralize the enchanter and range advantage, just win condition of simply playing through bot in that case. So simply going for a rebuff into bot gank or clearing to top and then ganking bot of the mismatch timer will be what Razor can look for from Fnatic. Now let's take a look at the game itself to further highlight what happens as a result of having a match jungle dynamic as compared to a mismatch jungle dynamic. So this is how the game starts out, with priority in the top lane and bot lane for the side of EG, and both junglers end up potting towards the bot side of the map. Now, with Viego being a faster clearing jungler, he's able to do his 6 camps and get to the crab by 3:15, whereas the Graves is slightly slower and will not be able to afford the same timer for himself. Now Viego can choose to play to extend his lead here, given that this is a match jungle potting scenario, and he can simply look to cross through mid, helping out Silas, and then being able to play for the top crab, or what he does instead is play for his bot lane win condition, further investing into that by moving into this bot side bush, clearing out any vision, dropping a ward for his bot lane, and then getting the reset in for himself. This results in a 20 CS lead for Caitlyn at 4 minutes due to the enforcement of Viego. While I would think that this is a overperformance, so this is slightly overpower. This is what can be expected for your bot lane to be able to do for the Caitlyn Lux lane to take a CS lead and be able to start dealing damage to the opponent's bot lane turret and taking some plates for themselves. However, you would start to see a change in this as a result of Silas needing some help of the reset from 4 to 6 minutes. What Viego would normally want to do here is clear out his camps and full clear towards the bomb side of the map again, perhaps doing the Dragon on spawn, similar to what Dom1 used to do quite a fair bit when they played Worlds in 2020. However, as the Silas needs help, and there's a big wave stacking in the bottom side of the map, EG chooses to look for a bot dive instead. There was a slight micro error from their side, which results them in not getting the biggest lead up as a result of the play. And as a result of that, Graves is able to hit on the top side of the map and clear out Viego's camps. So initially, from what would have been a match jungle parting, where both junglers would path down to bot and Viego would continue to match the position of Graves and forcing the lead of the Caitlyn and the Lux, EG chooses to try to extend the lead unnecessarily, and what happens is that the match jungle parting becomes a mismatched jungle parting. And as a result of that, the knowledge that Graves could be on the bottom side of the map while the Viego is clearing out topside camps prevents the Caitlyn and Lux from dealing as much damage and from making as much progress on the bot lane dart as they would have liked to have done. So at 4 minutes the Caitlyn had a 20 CS lead, at 10 minutes that was not able to be extended effectively, and EG with Leona and Misfortune hitting the level 6 spikes, they lose their main source of pressure in the game and are unable to close out and effectively pressure the scaling composition that Fnatic has, with Fnatic not only being able to punish this effectively, taking a lead in the early game, but effectively scaling to their power spikes and rather cleanly winning this game against EG. So in summary, the big idea is to know that if you have a range advantage, the idea is that you want to be match jungle potting as much as possible, where you then play for the jungler's lead instead of directly influencing the lane. Whereas if it's a mismatch potting, where if this was the likes of a Kai'Sa or Nautilus for EG, then perhaps this movement for Viego would have made a little bit more sense, using the priority from the mid lane to force a 4v2, 4v3, where they're able to burst somebody out, and they're much more happy with the waves bouncing back and forth in those scenarios. And with that, this is the first video that I'm doing for the 2020 World Championship. Of course, I will be trying to get in as many videos as possible and covering as many of the games, highlighting things for players or coaches who like to learn from. If you enjoy this style of content, please do consider liking and subscribing to this video. I also have a Patreon, which will be linked in the comments, where I will be going through VOD review worksheets, where you will be able to then participate and then try out some of the multiple choice options or some of the questions that I pose to my players as well. Have a nice day and enjoy and get hyped for Worlds.